Emily.
Hello.
Today I'm joined on the couch by Emily, and she is going to tell us all about her experience living abroad. And we have run this podcast series to share the stories of the partners of those that move for work around the world, because it's the untold stories of these partners that we can learn the most from, I believe, because they're the ones that are having to navigate the life admin of moving themselves and their families around the world. So thriving abroad is really about sharing the untold stories of partners that move for amazing opportunities around the world. So thanks, Emily.
No problems. Thanks for having me, Amber.
You're welcome. Now, we're going to start with your story. Tell us your story.
Well, in terms of my moving abroad story, all right. So in 2014, I was pregnant with my second son and about to go into hospital to have him. And simultaneously, my husband had come to me and said, hey, there's this opportunity for us to relocate and head over to China. But it was still in very early stages. So I was a bit, didn't really think much of it at first because it was such a big life change, and I'm already having a second baby. So it was a lot busy. There was a lot going on. So I had my baby, and in hospital, Nick kept coming in to me and saying, so what do we think? And then I realised actually this was a little bit more serious than I initially thought it was, and he'd progressed a little bit further in interview stage. So we got home from hospital. We had a just 2-year-old, so a little boy, my firstborn, and then my secondborn, Will, just tiny. And in the throes and the chaos of being becoming a family of 4, we were also discussing moving to China. So after lots of deliberation and back and forth, we decided, why not, give it a go. And Nick ended up signing a contract. I think Will must have been 3 or 4 weeks old at the time, and he started a contract. So that move required us to move from Sydney, where we were living at the time, to Shenzhen. And it was a new job. So it was not an expat role where someone in this company had come to him and said, we're going to move you for this amount of time. This was open-ended, new job, new company, and new country. So we took, it took quite a while to get all our visa documents for China. I would say probably a couple of months ready. And in the meantime, we had to sort out our home in Sydney, pack everything into storage, work out a good time to move with the little ones, because people had told us, if you're going to move, make sure you do your medical stuff with the kids and the vaccinations before you get there. So ideally, our time frame, I think it was about when Will was 4 months old. That was when I would move with the boys. But in the meantime, Nick left early to go and find an apartment for us and kind of see the best places for us to live, and with the going to be the most expats and the most community, which is hard to do when you're not there. His company also hadn't moved many expats to Shenzhen before. So that was a little bit tricky because we didn't have a wealth of knowledge behind us with people we could call and say, hey, we're moving, where's the best place to live, where's the best place to be.
Pioneers.
Yeah, we were actually. So that in itself, we didn't really probably understand the magnitude of that until we got there. So we were in Shenzhen for 1 year, and Nick was commuting to factories within that. So we actually lived at the time, it was more of an expat, newer part of the city, but it also meant that sacrifice meant that Nick's work journey was a little bit longer. So he would his travel to his commute was quite long, which made the days really, really long.
How did you navigate being in a different country with effectively a newborn?
It was It was challenging, to say the least. And I think we had a lot of, when we made the decision to leave, we actually had a lot of people around us who were saying to us, it's probably a little bit early to go with a newborn, but it's also a great time to go with kids, as in they're small and the only thing kids need at that age is the safety of their parents in their home. So they can't say we don't want to go because we have a life and we have school friends and we're into sport. So it was a great time to go in terms of the kids' ages. But there was a lot of challenges associated with moving to China, which we discovered and kind of fumbled our way through for the first 12 months. And then we had an opportunity to move to Hong Kong, which was
after 1 year.
After 1 year, yeah. So it was just across the border, and we'd gone to Hong Kong many times, and I can get into this with lots of other stories about that. But we after 1 year we decided Hong Kong. China was actually a really hard place to be with little kids, and the more we went to Hong Kong for various reasons, the more we realised actually that that's going to make our entire journey as expats much easier, which it was in the end.
How long were you in Hong Kong for?
So we ended up staying in Hong Kong for 6 years. So we were away for 7 years altogether. And we, I want to say we had 5 awesome years in Hong Kong where we just...
The first 5?
Yeah, the first 5 were awesome. The last one was probably the hardest, and that was the COVID year. But prior to that, we kind of, felt like there was a lot of rumblings going on after the protests and after the riots in Hong Kong, which made us kind of seriously consider how long we were going to stay for. We did 7 years away altogether, and we moved back in 2021. Yep. Yeah. Through that year.
That's a significant amount of time to be away from Australia and to have an opportunity to immerse yourself in a different culture, though.
Yeah, it was. It was awesome. My parents actually had expatted prior to their retirement, so they were big advocates for us to go and go while the kids are young and experience what you can and do some travel and learn the ropes overseas for me, and then come back before they get too many routes overseas. And but it was a hard decision for us to go, because a lot of expats who we met in our travels were all there on time limits within their companies. So we were always used to think, it's much easier for them because when the company says, hey, your contract's over, or it's time to move back, or we've got another assignment for you, then that's kind of the pathway.
The decision's made for them.
The decision's made. But for us, it was kind of a bit open-ended. And before we left to come back to Australia, we'd signed on to go to live in America and for Nick to be in the head office over there. And then Trump got in the way of that and decided to put an executive order on our kind of visa. Yep. So that kind of literally trumped our decision to move to America, and we ended up coming back here.
Where would that have seen you?
In Boston.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think if they'd probably said to us a few years earlier, we've got a position for you, we probably would have jumped on, and who knows, maybe still would have been there. But it was just such an uncertain time in COVID, and our kids were online for a year with school enclosures, and so we just thought, no, we really need some stability, and that was probably the decision why we ended up coming back to Australia.
And then why Perth?
Well, Perth is actually somewhere we both of us wanted to move to. So ever since we got married, we were always looking at opportunities back in Perth. Okay. I grew up in Perth, so I wanted to come back eventually. Next to Melbourne, and then we had our boys and met in Sydney. So Yeah, so we knew we wanted to settle in a city where we had family, and so the choice really came down to Melbourne or Perth. So very happy to be back to Perth.
And you have 3 children now. So where did the third happen?
So Claudia was born in Wicklow, and she was born in 2017. So we left with 2 and came home with 3.
Yeah, I know how that feels. Sort of.
Yeah, it's but it was I think the process of going through pregnancy and being in Hong Kong was a very smooth journey. And
can you share the differences in the medical system between Hong Kong and Australia?
Yes, but it would probably be more helpful if I shared it. There's more challenges we faced when we lived in China. So I think that was probably one of the main reasons why we ended up moving from Shenzhen to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Purely because I think, and I probably hadn't anticipated it. I probably should have thought a little bit more about it. But like I said, we were kind of pioneers in moving, so we didn't have a lot of experience behind us or people to talk to ask questions. So we kind of landed probably a little bit naively in China. And I think my second born, he must have been about 5 months old when we landed. So we stayed back a couple of months while Nick was learning the ropes and getting into work and finding somewhere to live. So when we finally got there, Will was a baby, and babies get sick all the time. Charlie was 2, and he was at the age where he basically went around with his tongue out, licking everything, every surface. He was just at that age where.
And what did that mean for you in China?
So it basically meant we were between the boys and myself, we were sick almost every second week. There was something. I cannot explain how that year was in terms of navigating sick kids and just the stress levels that we faced every time one of them got sick. And I just went down this rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, I've got to find the medical centre. I've got to understand what they're saying. I've got to get myself there. We didn't have access. We didn't have a driver. We didn't have access to a car. And I didn't feel very safe getting into a taxi, for example, with 2 little boys because there's no proper seat belts. And it was basically me holding onto 2 little ones, or one strapped to me and one next to me, and kind of navigating away through the streets where the roadblocks are very different. And I felt quite vulnerable probably with the little boys. And our experiences for just, ear infections or chest infections were it was a whole day of getting myself there. I'd have to organise a car through a Chinese speaker at Nick's work who would organise a car. They'd pick me up with the boys, take me to the medical centre, and it would be a full, almost like a full day.
So a full-time job?
It was a full-time job, with the sickness. And we were also navigating at the same time that Nick's insurance and the help,
how do you interact with that health system because we were foreigners?
Yeah, we were foreigners, and his health insurance didn't cover every provider. And the provider that was closer to us, I had no relationship with. And the HR department in Shenzhen was very, there wasn't much leeway with, you can only go to these providers basically. So that was really difficult. So for example, both of the boys were sick at one point, probably about 3 or 4 months in, or maybe a bit longer, maybe about 6 months into us arriving. Charlie had an ear infection, and Will had a nasty sounding chest. And I knew both of them probably needed antibiotics. So we organised this car. We went to the International Medical Centre. That was not a short drive, probably about a 40-minute drive. Got there with 2 really sick little boys, and the international clinics that we were going to were branded as international. But the reality is they weren't so international, and the doctors were great, but they couldn't communicate in English. So we had some access to the nurses who were there, and they could speak some broken English. But on this particular occasion, we were there, and the doctors looked at the boys.
I'm a bit worried about this story.
And Charlie was really sick. He had a fever, and I knew he had an ear infection. But they were really focused on, well, there was 2 doctors standing around him, and they were, Anyway, it came back in broken English that he had pneumonia. He wouldn't survive the night, and he needed to be admitted to hospital on a drip. And at that point, I just thought, well, I don't know what to do. So I called Nick, and he was, we've got to get to Hong Kong, and we've got to go to the hospital over there. So we had some contacts and also my friends.
Have you actually got on a plane?
No, because it's a cross-border.
Sorry, okay.
So we organised it. We have to organise, not all cars can go across the border, so you have to order a separate car, a cross-border car, to get you from China to Hong Kong. And then we called ahead at the hospital and said we're coming across.
Wow.
So, and this was probably, one of the more stressful times I had over there. But anyway, we ended up getting across to the hospital, and we walked in, and the doctor took one look at Will and said, I can tell you now, he hasn't got pneumonia and he's going to survive the night, but we'll give you an x-ray just to, because it can walk this way. So so that was a lot of panic, and potentially a lot of
the inability to communicate.
Yeah. The language barriers were huge for really important things. So
okay, so we've spoken about the health system and the challenges.
Yeah, so the healthcare system, that was certainly one of the big challenges. And I think, the language barrier was quite big. Another challenge that I've faced more in 100% in China was the shopping and the logistics of it, because I didn't have access to anything rather than myself and a double pram, and either a walk somewhere, or I'd catch the train. I'd feel a bit more in control if I caught a train, because I knew where I was going, I knew I could get off. I was kind of the same pattern every time, and I didn't have to feel as worried sitting in a taxi with 2 little ones, and
less vulnerable.
Yeah. So so I think the transport was a huge issue, just getting around in general.
How did you find being in China? Did you feel welcome there? Wasn't normal for people, foreigners, to be there?
No, I think if we probably visited where we landed 11 years ago, we'd probably find it quite different. It wasn't it was certainly more of an expat community than a lot of the other areas around where we lived. But you could go all day and not bump into someone from the community. So I would say it was a lot more isolated than I thought it was going to be.
And your children were quite young, but for others that are travelling and taking school-age children with them, perhaps they'd have a different experience because they'd have that instant community with a school.
Definitely, yeah. I think, moving with 2 little ones who are totally dependent on you was a huge challenge, and I was, I was totally prepared to do that, but I think it was a huge job, kind of, with not much support. If something went wrong in the day, Nick's, was an hour away at least to come home. And there's, no support system until I, got into the community a bit more and met a few people who became friends quite quickly, and they had similar age kids. But certainly moving with little kids who aren't in school, it's is much more isolating. Yeah.
So to round out the challenges that you've faced in China that you wanted to share, I mean, we've spoken about the medical system, the language, the potentially a bit isolating community base there. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
The only other thing nothing, that were probably the main ones. And I think if I'd moved to China and it was just Nick and I would have had a very different experience and probably been able to immerse myself in the culture and learning the language and had a really different perspective. We did actually meet another family who lived there, but they all had older primary school and high school age children. And
so maybe it'd be different for you now.
Yeah, I think it would be really different. And I think, doing things like learning the language, being able to go out to the markets and joining tour groups and doing the hikes. There were some beautiful mountain areas near where we lived, and I didn't really get to see that side of life just because of the age my kids were at. And it was just a stage. And in saying that, I've also got friends who are still living there. They're fluent in the language. Their kids are thriving at school, and but they had to get through that, those challenging years of, the kids being really little and feeling really vulnerable and being a long way from home. And the other funny thing about moving to China was, their internet system's very different. So obviously things like Facebook, you couldn't get access to Facebook, we couldn't get access to ABC2, which was like a lifeline, when we left. Everything was with WeChat. So it was quite different, and there were ways around it, and you just need to find your community and they'll tell you, there's a guy who can come and sort it out, the VPN in, but it never worked properly, So there was a lot of challenges like that. It wasn't straightforward. And if something happened in our apartment, like we had a leak one day, like a leak in our apartment, and just like, going through the process of this is who we have to talk to, it's not this person. It would take a lot of time and a lot of negotiation and a lot of talking to the right person, and we couldn't talk, so we'd have to ask people from
having to rely on others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And we did have I had a little bit of help once we'd settled in. I had a lady who come and do a little bit of housework for me, but she spoke mostly Chinese, but that was great because she would sit on the floor with the boys, play with them, sing to them in Chinese, and they'd love it. They'd think it was a break from me too. So, and I got a couple of hours where I could just
do we need to
go far, but did a couple of things that I needed to do where I didn't have kids around. But so it was a big sacrifice to move away from support, move away, from.
What were your key takeaways from your time in China?
No.
I'll be just proud of yourself that you did it.
Yes. Proud. And all those challenging times, I think it proves to you and your family that, you can get through things. And there's always a way, and I think once you settle in a place, things do get easier. Yeah. And I think, once I'd settled and got myself into a bit more of a group of mums with kids similar age, then, you start exploring a bit more as a group of people rather than
safety numbers.
Yeah. And just, and seeing, the mums who had older kids and what they were able to do and what they were achieving, that was always good to know that, this is a stage and, it's not going to last forever.
When you embarked on the expat journey initially, what won out for you? The idea of adventure and excitement, or the idea that this would get you ahead financially?
It was probably both. Nick and I had done a little bit of travel together, but the thought of being based in Asia and having access to travel, but being a different culture was really exciting. It was a new opportunity for Nick to do, and I think having international experience on your CV is valuable. Yeah. So,
It's definitely a stepping stone.
Step up. Yeah, absolutely. And then the company he was moving to work with, he was really excited. So there was lots of factors in the decision making. Financial, we probably wouldn't have moved if the financial gain didn't make sense, because it does, we kind of worked out before we left that, we had to be there for a certain amount of time just to
break even.
Because it's not, we got a lot included. Different expats have different levels of inclusions with their contracts. And that's another point that I would probably make is when you're, depending on what life stage you're in, you're not always thinking maybe 5 years ahead, because you think it's only going to last, like 2 or 3 years. But when we left, school wasn't anywhere top of mind for us. So there was no inclusions for schooling. However, as we, stayed on and time went by, schooling became really important. So, I think it's just important to go, okay, we're moving in this life stage, but we kind of have to know what's ahead contract-wise for all the different stages that are ahead.
Definitely. I wish there was a standardised approach to international assignments and taking jobs abroad, but it's almost the opposite.
Yes.
It goes from pretty standard when you're based in one country to when you're in a different country. It can be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And you meet a lot of, especially not so much in China. We found a lot of the people actually who lived in China were more there for a short burst of time. So they were all in, their kids were a bit older, or they were on the retiring end of their journey in their careers. So they had a great time because, they just were there with a different mindset. But I think, going with smaller kids and with a growing family, it presents a whole new, different set of challenges. And
So let's think about Hong Kong now. Yeah. Move to Hong Kong. What would be some challenges you want to share about your time there?
Hong Kong challenges, I don't want to say they paled in comparison, but they kind of did.
Yeah, okay. Because you already had you could appreciate how much easier it was in Hong Kong because you just had the experience in China.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the more we went to Hong Kong, and we used to go to Hong Kong because it was so close. So we could either catch a ferry from where we lived, or we could catch a cross-border car. So so we'd been there and we'd done different things. We had to go for some medical appointments, and Will had a big scan that he had to have. So there was lots of different reasons why we went to Hong Kong. Every time we went there, we'd be like, and we'd literally cross the border and go, oh, wow, and I think it was the access to the more, I know it sounds silly when we were talking about being expats and exploring and,
more familiarity.
And again, if I didn't have the little kids, it wouldn't have bothered me. But, the things like medicine or Panadol or, getting antibiotics, from a certain place, or food, if your children have allergies, or they need different products and different brands.
There's more options there?
There's more options.
And what about the language compared to the two places? Was there?
So where we lived in Hong Kong it was chalk and cheese. So it was almost 99%, but there was probably 95% of people living where we ended up relocating to were English speakers. So it was, very easy from that point of view. Culturally, it's a very small city. So, you could go out at any time and feel, like the city was alive and there was lots to do.
Accessible.
So it's very accessible. The public transport system was hands down amazing. We didn't have a car or access to our own transport as well.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I missed anything by not having it, because you could always get yourself around really easily.
Yeah, I think so. suppose we were talking about challenges in
challenges in
but ultimately you had a much easier time in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So the big challenges in Hong Kong was probably adjusting your expectations in terms of accommodation. So your money in China goes quite a long way in terms of the size of your apartment that you can have as a rental in China, whereas in Hong Kong you need to,
rate that
to about half as,
accommodation
for more than double. So that was challenging. Hong Kong is very high rise.
So, where the lifestyle.
Yeah, the lifestyle was quite different. So you needed to adjust your expectations. Where we lived, there was lots of low rise villas where you would have, a small courtyard. That obviously came at a price. And then you'd have to sacrifice your living space inside. So you get a little bit of outdoor space, but then your living space would kind of...
Well, both China and Hong Kong, did you rent places that were furnished or did you have to furnish?
That's a good question. China was partly furnished, but we did take some furniture that I probably in hindsight wouldn't have taken. I would have packed up our house and stored things very, very differently if I was doing it today.
You would have taken less.
I would have taken less, and I would have sold more. So I would have stored very, very little.
Yeah,
because you come home after 7 years and you don't even know you've stored really. So
and then same with Hong Kong. Furnished?
No, Hong Kong we had no furnished apartments at all. They were.
And you had several apartments. You said you've moved around there.
Yeah, so that was another challenge living in Hong Kong, I guess, was, and where we lived was quite transient. So there was a lot of people who had become residents. So for Hong Kong, you have to live there for 7 years before you can become a resident. And a lot of people where we lived actually became residents and ended up buying properties.
Not that far off.
No, no, we gave that up.
So that was the accommodation part?
Yeah, the accommodation
challenge, or just something to readjust to?
Yeah, and just more transient, as in,
yes,
owners would decide to sell, you wouldn't be given much notice, and then, you'd be finding somewhere else to live. And it's hard to tick all the boxes, and you just have to, again, reduce your expectations.
Do they sign up for years, like 1 year contracts? Do you recall, like in Australia?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were 1 year contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a long time, but realistically, when you're somewhere for 6 years, that could mean 6 different.
That's right. Yeah. And I think we ended up living in 3 different apartments in 6 years in Hong Kong, and then we had the apartment in China as well.
Any other challenges you want to share?
The only other challenge, and I think that's quite more applicable to Hong Kong, obviously, because I just spent more time there, but it was such a transient city. So by the time we moved to Hong Kong, my eldest was looking at going to kindy, so I immediately met a really lovely group of actually Australian girls who were from Sydney, and we became really close really quickly.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get really close to people and they become almost like family overnight, they can come to you within a week and say, we're moving, actually, we've decided, time's up, or we're being moved on. So that was a big challenge as well, was just that transient nature and having friendship groups and kids' friendship groups change.
So regularly.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like you had quite a good experience in Hong Kong. Is there anything else you want to share from a challenge?
The only other challenge we had, and I think I mentioned this earlier too, was knowing when to move. Knowing when the time is up. And that, when you're not tied to a company that's telling you you've got to go, that's really difficult because you have to weigh up, do we move back for a new job? Do we just move back? Or do we move back based on kids' schooling age? And, they're getting to the age where they're starting to put down roots, and our kids came back to Australia and they'd only ever known. So, that was challenging for sure. Yeah.
But ultimately, when, politics got in the way, it helped make that decision for you?
It helped make that decision, and absolutely when COVID hit, Nick was actually travelling when they first announced it.
Yeah.
He was in America, just coming back from America, and I remember saying to him, I think we've got to get back to Australia because the day before they'd sent out a note saying...
And ultimately, you got locked in there in Hong Kong, or you came back to Australia?
Well, we got out just in time, so we were lucky. But they'd shut the schools. So I remember ringing Nick and saying, we've got to make a move.
That was such an unnerving time for everyone, and something that no one really alive had experienced that level of unknown before.
Yeah, the uncertainty and the what's and it just felt like it would, like, little areas of your life were crumbling. You didn't know, is this temporary? Is this be a permanent thing? Yeah. So that was certainly a big factor for us in the time estimate. We'd have to make a decision. So we actually came back to Perth and stayed with my mum and dad for a few months, and then we had to go back to Hong Kong. We were even contemplating, do we even go back to...
Yeah, to tie up loose ends there.
Who's going to go and tie up the loose ends? But we all ended up going back, and we went back and the kids were still online. So I think our kids in that year were off school for about 8 months. So we were homeschooling. Nick couldn't cross the border because the borders between Hong Kong and China were shut. So he was upstairs in the bedroom working, and I had 2 boys downstairs online, and then a toddler kind of like twiddling around doing anything. So,
and probably a big part of the stage in your life that you were in at the time, but you didn't work while you were an expat family, right?
Yeah.
So you were really left to manage the house and to navigate being, in a different country, not only working out how to be a mum, and a relatively new mum, a two-year-old and a newborn, to also do that in
another country.
Yeah. And this is why we are holding these podcasts, because I just think that that's massive. Like, having a child in Australia next to your support network is big in itself, and then to step outside your comfort zone and do something else is just next level. All right, what we are going to wrap up with is the absolute best parts of your expat experience. Share those with us.
I think there was loads of really good parts. I think just being around full-time another culture and being immersed in living in a national, in a city which you end up loving at the end, because Hong Kong's one of those cities you just end up falling in love with.
Got your favourite restaurant?
Yeah.
Favourite area?
Yeah. Well, it's probably all changed now because we've been back for quite a few years. But you should have told me what you were going to ask, because
that's all right. So we're just going.
I've just forgotten all the names. It's just like blank.
No, it's okay. And we can always share a list of your top places when we release.
Yes.
So that might be fun.
There's loads of, and we probably did a lot of family things on the weekend. So we were out exploring islands, we were doing hikes, and the other great thing was Hong Kong actually has a lot of national holidays throughout the year. So we would take the opportunity and travel. So we did trips back to America. We did a couple of trips to America. We tagged along with me.
Yeah, amazing.
Work, and we did lots of trips around Asia. And then we went to Australia. So it was amazing, and I have great memories of it. But the sad thing is, because the kids were much younger, we say, "Oh, you've been there and you've done that," and they don't know recollection, sadly.
I found this a little bit too with our short experience as an expat family, but what I have found that has stayed with them is their idea that the world is wide.
Yes.
And that there are all these experiences out there to be had, and that certainly stayed with them.
Yes.
Did you find that?
Yeah, definitely. And they talk very, very fondly of their time in Hong Kong, so they only have really golden memories of their time there, and they have some gorgeous friends that they still communicate with. And they do. They have quite a a great perspective on how big it is. And I think that's definitely a plus. And I would, there were really challenging times where I used to think, oh, what have we done? But in hindsight, I would change anything. And I think people learn a huge amount about, ourselves and our family. And yeah, I would 100% hands down recommend it to anyone who's wanting to do it, because I think once you've had that opportunity, that experience, it's amazing. It's a really amazing chapter to have to reflect on.
Right. Absolutely. And that kind of makes me think of stepping outside our comfort zone, because I've seen like a growth mindset, yes, that's the ability to grow as people. And that's exactly what you did in Experience.
Yeah, definitely.
And now your kids and you have all these relationships with people, mainly in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
That, even though they may be transient, are then going to take you to potentially having relationships and connections all around the world.
Yeah, that's true. Because a lot of our friends have gone back to their homes in UK, America, even Asia, and and I think that's really cool. And hoping that if we ever do any travel again, we can reconnect. You always have some
time.
Friendships.
You've been back for a while. You need
to time.
Would you do it again?
Yes. The only if my kids now were all at an age where they're like, yeah, let's go, I would definitely do it, but I'd probably have to know there was a limit.
I would probably need that also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We spoke about that with Jo actually in a previous podcast about she got some pushback from her oldest when they were first making the move, and ultimately now the daughter who was the most was the most apprehensive about making the move is so happy. So sometimes I do think, as hard as those moves might be, all we want to do is enrich our kids' life, right? And
definitely
amazing experiences.
Yeah. And I think that's probably true for my eldest as well. He was someone who suffered with, just coming back and settling in and just having planning for his life, his friends, his school back in Hong Kong. So I think that was certainly true for him. And I think the older they are, the harder that gets, and the more roots they have and friendships. So it becomes a really hard decision the older the kids get.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I haven't shared this before, but we had the opportunity to become an expat family when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I would have been about 13, 14. And the reason that I make such a black and white statement about making our kids join life and spread their wings is because I couldn't make dad my hands in. I wouldn't leave. And I would leave. And the series of events that unfolded after that was, my dad decided to still take the opportunity, but he would do 5 weeks away, 2 weeks back.
Yeah.
The toll that took on our family, both their relationship, my sibling, like all these things, sort of the flow-on effect from all of that is definitely a story for another time, but we always weigh up these opportunities for our families. And I'm so happy that ultimately you had the most amazing experience for your family. And who knows what the future holds, right?
Yeah, it's true. You never know.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me on the couch, Emily.
Thank you.
Let's go do school pickup.
I know.
Okay.
Pick up.